Just a second. Yeah. Yeah. So, like, first of all, I would like to know about how did you get into cinema, and how did you or fell in love with cinema? Like, what's your connection? A little bit about that.
All right. I mean, I guess it's pretty much like every other kid that grew up in the 90s. I grew up watching Jurassic Park, Star Wars, all these films that took me to other worlds and jump started my imagination. I used to draw a lot as a kid. I remember that even with my own toys, I liked creating my own stories. So by the age of 7, I was already trying to do things or attempts at cinema, unbeknownst to me. I remember my dad, he had a video camera, a camcorder. And I remember when I was 7, I took it and I took my dinosaur toys and I made some sort of a short film with it. And that was like my first entry level approach to it. Once I got into high school, I started realizing that there's other countries making movies, not just the United States and Hollywood. So I started getting first into other Latin American films. I remember that time, it was the time when Y Tu Mamá También from Mexico had come out on DVD. And I remember I rented it. I also rented Amores Perros, City of God from Brazil. Those were like the first other sources of cinema that I got, and that were not from Hollywood, and that were closer to the things that I saw in growing up in the Dominican Republic. And that to me opened up a brand new gate of things. In my mind, I was like, okay, so maybe it is a possibility to create stories that come from a Dominican or Caribbean perspective. And so I started making my own short films with my friends when I was 14, 15 years old. And I've always liked taking elements from my own culture, but also taking elements from what I liked from those Hollywood films that I still enjoy to this day. I watch pretty much everything. So it's full-on love affair with cinema. That's my relationship with it. I like discovering new hidden gems from all over the world, but I also love the films that are showing at the mainstream cinemas, if they're good, or the big films that come for award seasons, if there's a connection, an emotional connection to it. But I mean, it's what I can say is that it's been a love affair since I was very little, and I feel very fortunate and lucky to be a part of this industry and to have my own stories be a part of the whole brickway of films that are made all over the world.
Right. So the films that you mentioned, the Mexican films and the other Latin American films. So I remember when I also have grown up watching, obviously, Hollywood films. There was this TV channel which had launched and which started showing world cinema. And that was a time I got exposed to non-English movies. And since that time, it has, similarly, it has been on my mind that, okay, how do you watch these movies? Where do you find them? So yeah, so I guess it's like these films are really well known. That's why this becomes our introduction to non-English films. So I want to know that you knew it in your childhood that you wanted to make films. You got interested. So, for example, in India, this kind of, at least when I was growing up, it was discouraged, a career in film or entertainment. Is it like in Hollywood, there are a lot of options for people, and they can afford to pursue a career in these fields more easily, I guess. So how was it in your country? Did you tell your family that you wanted to be a filmmaker? And
Oh yeah, definitely. And at first they saw it as a hobby. They're like, oh yeah, that's a phase. He's gonna get over it. I'm 34. I'm still not over it. I don't think I'll ever be over it. But something really interesting has happened in my country. And I'm sure it's happened in yours as well. And it's that growing up, we had the same sort of ambience when it came to the perception or acceptance of taking on a film career, coming from a country like mine. For example, in my case, my parents, they're both economists, so they're both very numbers oriented. They're very much into maths and sciences, social sciences. So it was not, it was at first to them, it was like, well, let's see. I mean, it's a creative outlet. He's doing something that's, I don't know, entrepreneurial. Because what I did was I made short films with my friends. I used my abilities in with a camera or editing to also in school for presentations, for projects, and I even helped out in different in different communities with doing videos as a teenager. But saying that you wanted to be a filmmaker, and this is early 2000s, 20 years ago or 24 years ago, it was just like saying you wanted to be an astronaut. It was like, yeah, like you say you want to be a filmmaker, but how are you gonna do it? How are you gonna make a career out of it? Because it was not perceived as a viable career path. I remember growing up, because our industry is much newer than yours by a lot. I remember when I was growing up, there had only been 3 or 4 Dominican films made at the time. I remember the first one was made a couple of years before I was born, in the mid-'80s. It was called Pasaje de Ida. It's an amazing film, by the way. It means one-way ticket.
okay.
And it's a film. It was actually the Dominican Republic's first submission to the Academy, and it was also the first serious feature-length film made in the country. And it's based on a true story about a group of people that snuck into one of these freighter ships to migrate to the US, but they perished in the process. So it was about what went on with how do you call it? It's because they're not castaways. The illegal migrants, what they were going through while they were in hiding in the ship, and things were going down. And that was actually the first film made in the Dominican Republic that was shown theatrically, that was 90 minutes long. That was like the first glimmer of what Dominican cinema could be. Then in the mid-'90s, when they made a film called Nueva York. It's like New York, but spelled the way that we Dominicans pronounce it. We pronounce a lot the R's with the L's, so it's like it's called Nueva York. And that was a big smashing box office hit in the country. And it's also a film, curiously, about migration. It's about there's a big population of Dominicans that migrated from the 60s and onwards to New York. So that's our biggest diaspora is in New York City. So it was a film about the culture clash of
Mhm.
going to the US for the first time and being from a country like mine. And they did a sequel to that, and that same director did another film in 2002, something like that. Other than that, it was very rare to see a Dominican film in the theaters growing up. Those were like the big ones, the two big ones.
Even in your country, it was rare to see.
Yeah, at the time. Now that's what I'm going to. Now it's very common. That's
Okay.
what's changed because we have so in the early 2000s there was also a project that was shown to Congress, and it took 10 years to get approved, and it was our tax incentive for film production. A lot of big businesses lobbied for it, even politicians that wanted to foster film industry in the Dominican Republic, and that changed everything. I
Okay.
remember I went to university in Canada. I was living in Montreal at the time, and I remember in my summers I would come to the Dominican Republic to work as an intern in production companies, but doing work in commercials, maybe some short form documentaries for television, but no one had made. I mean, there had been movies made, but they were all extremely low budget, super indie movies. Most of them at the time did not meet the criteria that we find that we're accustomed to find as moviegoers from any part of the world, because we without the tax incentive, unless the film was highly commercial comedy for a broad audience, people used to make films. Those who dared to make a film would do it with a micro budget. I even know a story of a director that used his mortgage to finance a film. That was the way it was done back then. But that completely changed when we suddenly had a tax incentive, and there was an incentive for companies to invest what they would instead pay in taxes, 25% of that in movie productions. And all of a sudden, there's, for example, the main universities in the country now have a film career. Now, most of the big companies in the country, and even medium to smaller ones, have invested or partaken in some way in films. There's a lot of we have the Dominican Republic's Film Commission has also made quite a few strides in terms of in the Department of Education, in terms of adding in programs for integrating the new graduates or the students to actual productions in the country. We have also a lot of foreign, even Hollywood films come shoot in the Dominican Republic, and this has all happened.
Sorry, I mean, this is something that Palamo did mention when we spoke about Dominican Republic becoming this attractive destination for Hollywood movies.
Yeah, completely, and especially during the pandemic, a lot of big Hollywood productions came in 2020, 2021. Given that we had, I don't know if it was good COVID management or a better infrastructure than other places, but we had all the resources to make a film. So a lot of Hollywood productions came. And that the beautiful thing about it is that it's all happening simultaneously, because we see a direct benefit from that, in the sense that technically, for example, the people that have worked on my films or friends' films, they've also worked on these Hollywood films. So they come with a brand new set of skills whenever they work on one of these movies and they applied it to ours, and it's quite a joy to watch. And now going, for example, growing up, we had probably maybe one big Dominican film a year, and it used to be a comedy.
Yeah.
Now we have film releases every single month, and we make more than, for a country our size, we make more than 30 films per year. And to us, that's a lot. That's quite a lot. And we came from not seeing that many films, Dominican films, while growing up, now to fighting for a spot in the cinemas to have a film. And now we also have films that are screening at the biggest festivals in the world, including Goa, including Sundance, Venice. We have films all over the world, and that happened in the span of 14 years,
Right.
from 2010 to 2024.
Yeah. I
And
mean, thanks to these festivals that I also got introduced to the cinema of your country. Otherwise, I would not have, it would not have been easily available. Yeah.
no, definitely, and even to us Dominicans, it used to be hard to come by a Dominican film, even because even then, even if a film was big, after it was pulled from the theaters, there was no streaming, there was no, maybe a DVD sale of like the most commercial ones, but it was not viable as a business to release these films at the time, because there was no streaming, there were no films weren't getting into festivals then. Now they are, and now there's a lot of new voices, which is also very exciting, because now there's a formal industry. So now it brings me a lot of joy, because now I see people, kids that were my age when I wanted to be a filmmaker, having a lot more support, because people see it as a more viable option. They're like, yeah, I mean, they can go to a university here, they can do internships, this and that company are investing a lot in movies, so there's a lot of productions, and there's Hollywood productions coming, so that there's it's a big paradigm shift from what I saw growing up. And I can only imagine how big of a difference it was from, like, even the pioneers that I mentioned, that were the only ones, the three only people making films when I was a child. I remember it must have been like saying you wanted to climb Mount Everest if you wanted to make films in the 70s, the 80s, or the 60s.
Right. So you mentioned about that you got inspired by Hollywood films.
Yeah.
So did you ever think about, like, for example, when I used to watch Hollywood films, I used to not see people from my country, or like even my skin color. Like, even I used to see people from my country, and they were like these immigrants, like taxi drivers, some shopkeepers. Did that occur to you that like people from our country, that's their position in these films?
Well,
Did you ever think
I have a
about
very
that?
sorry,
Yeah.
I have a very personal anecdote. It's actually quite, now that you mention it, it has a lot to do with what you're saying. So when I was let's say 7, 8 years old, I also loved superheroes. And I remember that unconsciously, whenever a costume party was about to happen, or a situation where one would dress up as a superhero, like a costume party, a birthday party, I remember quite clearly, and not knowing why, being resistant to dressing up as Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, because I felt that I did not look like them.
Right.
But now we have I think he's Dominican Puerto Rican. We have a Dominican Puerto Rican Spider-Man, which is Miles Morales from the Into the
Oh,
Spider-Verse movies. He comes from a
oh,
Dominican family, and that to me is amazing that these things are happening now that didn't happen then. I remember also that, yeah, I remember in these films we would either be represented as criminals or maybe had a very, very small role or not be in movies at all. I remember there's actually a very interesting story about, I mean, not it's like we hadn't had let's say superstar uh from Dominican origins up until Avatar. Zoe Saldana she's from Dominican
oh,
descent.
oh, oh, wow.
You know what I mean? Like it was not, we did not have that before. And even if you looked at other Latin American countries, most of the Latin American stars did not make the jump to Hollywood at the time.
Mm.
Um, be it the language barriers, be it also that the lack of roles. I remember there's a big advocate in Hollywood for Latin American representation, which is John Leguizamo, and also Edward James Olmos. They were pioneers. They were Edward James Olmos was in Blade Runner. He was in Miami Vice. He was in a lot of these big productions. He's one of the I believe he's one of the founders of the LA Latin American Film Festival, which is also a big stage for Latin American films to get shown in the US.
Mm.
But definitely, I think times are changing. I think also since people have become more exposed, given if I mean, for example, if you look at the shows that are trending on Netflix, for example, chances are that there's a Korean TV show, that there's a Spanish TV show, like for example, I'm thinking Money Heist or Squid Games, because
Mm.
those were some of the two biggest hits on the platform. But also, if you look at the films that have won the Oscars in the last 10 years, you have Parasite winning best foreign picture. So there's the thing is that the audiences have become more aware of the stories from all over the world because there's more access, and I
Mm.
think that in and of itself is bringing in more representation, in the sense that there's also a lot of investment by companies like Netflix or production companies to say, okay, so rather than go against this wave, let's set up shop. For example, Netflix, they have offices in Spain, they have offices in Mexico, they have offices in Brazil. I believe they have offices in Korea. I don't know if they do in India, but
Yeah,
they
they have,
probably do.
yeah.
I've seen Netflix original movies and original shows from India. So the environment is quite different, because also I think that the weight of the Hollywood star has diminished a lot. Now people are focused on the quality of the content or the quality of the storytelling. Doesn't
Right.
matter anymore if you have a big name actor. I remember reading an article saying that the movie star in a short time will be a thing of the past, and some of
Yeah.
the last movie stars in the world right now are probably Tom Cruise, DiCaprio, like people that are box office draws by themselves.
Mhm.
That's something that is not a trend anymore. Now
So
people want to
fame is
see,
dying. Basically, fame, that kind of fame is on
yeah,
a
and the
decline.
power of story is rising.
Yes, true, true. So a couple of small questions. Okay, but first I want to touch upon this theme of migration, which you spoke about. So this I didn't know, but when I watched Insular, and while I was talking to Palamo also, she told me about this, that this this migration of people from Haiti to Dominican Republic, it's a thing, and how they are, like all of this thing is an issue, or it's a thing. So now that you mentioned that, the earliest film that you mentioned, it was also about people migrating. So when you were making Insular, did you what do you say? So it came to you because it's a national thing, a national theme that resonates with people of Caribbean nations, or like how some things come naturally, like how do I say? So for example, in India, we we got independence in 1947, and that was also the year when we saw partition. Pakistan was carved out of India, and for a really long time, a lot of literature, cinema, TV shows, a lot of them, they were about partition. That was the theme that they were exploring, about separation, like some people who families were separated because of separate partition. And like people have been waiting. Even now there are a lot of people who wait for years, like 50, 60 years. They have met, siblings have met. So that was a theme immediately after independence. So is it something like this migration, or is it something that you thought that you wanted to, like tackle? I don't know if I'm making sense. Is it like a national?
Yeah, completely. And I love that question because it's something that I always go back to. I think the answer to your question is both, and I'll explain why. From a, let's say, national perspective, the Caribbean or Caribbean islands, there were no original, let's say, settlers. Even the first settlers, the Aboriginal populations that came to this island or to the neighboring islands, they came from South America, from the Orinoco River. They navigated to the Caribbean, and then comes the European colonization. Then comes the Haitian Revolution. After the Haitian Revolution, they become the first independent country in the region, even before the United States. Also the slave trade. All of the Afro population from America came from a very tragic and partitioned form of migration, where they separated entire families, and took one to one country, one to another, and they never saw each other again. But I think the topic of migration in modern times became a thing right after the slaying of our dictator. We had a dictatorship from 1930 to 1961.
Your country had
in our country. So during the dictatorship, only very few selected people could freely travel, let's say, to the United States, to other countries in South America. It was a very privileged thing to afford traveling and to be granted access to traveling, to a passport or getting visas. So very few people, other than diplomats or even ministers, or other than that, not no one really traveled up until the 60s in the Dominican Republic. It was not a thing that was perceived as possible. And prior to the beginning of the dictatorship, we had a U.S. occupation from 1916 to 1924, and the 60s and 70s were very tumultuous in politically. So once the dictator was assassinated, Trujillo, the floodgates to the United States opened, and a lot of people migrated to New York, to Spain, to Florida. Well, Florida came after the Cubans, but that was also the time. The Cuban population in Miami came to be right after the Cuban Revolution. People fleeing it because they did not believe in the Cuban Revolution. So yeah, I think. Oh, and if you take into consideration that Puerto Rico came from being a Spanish colony and ended up being a U.S. state, we do have a I don't know, at least with the U.S. we do have a thing with migrating to the U.S. because it is perceived culturally as a means of finding progress or finding a better life or success. Even to this day, and even if it's not true, a lot of people, they tend to migrate to the U.S. to send, even also economically. One of our greatest sources of income is the people from the diasporas working in New York, Madrid, where the biggest Dominican populations abroad are, sending in money to their families. That's still one of the biggest sources of income in our country. So if you take that into consideration, migration is in our DNA from the very beginning. And personally, that is always a topic that has fascinated me. Even from my first few projects and my first feature-length film, I realized, as I started maturing as an artist, I realized that was always a topic that was present in my work, one way or another. I remember my first documentary was about how Dominican and Caribbean fine arts came to be. It's basically a story of how the people that were fleeing World War II and the Spanish Civil War that settled in the Dominican Republic created the National Fine Arts Academy and bred the first formal generation of Dominican artists. And we have that because of migration.
That's I think very beautiful, because
yeah, and that was to me what inspired the documentary, because, and it's called República del Color, Republic of Color, because also migrating to the Caribbean affected tremendously, but in a positive way, the art of all of these artists that were fleeing Europe at the time. Their work gained another color palette. The subject matter changed. Even in terms of representation, this is something that quite connects with what we've been talking about. The Dominican artists that existed before the European migration to the country in the 30s, they were all they leaned more, they wanted to paint like Europeans. That's the first thing. They always chose European looking subjects. They always wanted to paint in a classic, even impressionistic style, but always trying to look European. And it took a whole generation of Europeans to come here, fleeing their countries, to make us appreciate what we already had, because they started what grabbed their attention when they came here was like, no, I have never seen this ethnicity. I have never seen this landscape. I have never seen a sea quite as blue as this one. So you mix that, and you mix in the academic formation that most of them were teachers had, and all of a sudden we have a new generation that is fully prepared to represent us in the arts. And in visual arts, to me, that is something that I'm quite proud, because we have a very vibrant art scene when it comes to painting, sculptures, performance, and that is also at the same time very Dominican and very Caribbean. And just as our films are starting to go into the main festivals in the world, we have Dominican artists showing up at the different art basels around the world, getting represented by Christie's or big art houses. And I think that goes back to saying that it's the power of being true to your roots. And going back to the theme of migration, I think, and focusing now more a little bit on Insular, I wanted to create a story that tackled the subject of what I was saying before, that migrating is perceived as success, as a form of success. In a way, if you look at the main character's arc in the story, he goes from wanting to leave at all costs to wanting to stay to realizing like, this is the place where I'm at. And that was fully intentional in the sense that, even to me, the first scene that came to my mind when thinking of the story is actually one of the last scenes in the film, when he's burning the money in front of the fireplace. Because the idea for the film came from two things. One, a short story that was written by one of my earlier mentors. He's a Dominican writer, and he wrote a short story called La Isla, which is about a university professor that gets into one of these migrant trips looking for He wrote a story called La Isla. It's a 4 pages long story. I can send you the translation if you want to read it.
Yeah, sure.
But it's pretty much the theme. Thematically, it's what gave the film its, let's say, its message, because it's about a university professor. College professors are intellectuals. These migrant trips are usually taken on by people who have no other option, or think they have no other option but to get into a wooden ship and face death, an almost certain death, going to cruising through the canal to go to Puerto Rico. The thing is that we are very close to Puerto Rico. It's like I believe it's only a couple of hours as a boat ride. And Puerto Rico is already, like I mentioned, the U.S. So if you're in Puerto Rico, you're already in the U.S. So you can technically go to other parts of the U.S. without having to have a visa, without having to be a resident, without having to show an American passport. So a lot of people find that enticing. And I met before starting this film many people from both sides. People that caught, people trying to make these trips, and people that tried to get on these trips and survived. And the story, La Isla, showed a very different profile. It was this man who was frustrated with not having the recognition he thought he deserved in the Dominican Republic, his wife having left him, a lot of frustrations that took him to embark on one of these trips. He becomes the sole survivor, and the story gets into more magical realism elements because he literally, the things he desire start manifesting one way or another on the aisle. So he believes, he comes to believe like, oh wait, this is better than where I was and better than where I'm going. I'm actually, why would I leave? So it becomes, so the motivation switch does a 180.
Right.
But at the end of the story, you realize that it's all in his delirium as the Coast Guards find him holding onto a raft in a delirious state. And everything you've read in the story is his own delirium. And that to me, and the idea of what, if you're on a deserted island, you can have $1 million,
But
you
no
can't do
use.
anything.
Yeah.
There's no use.
Yeah.
And that's what motivated the story, because I also wanted to tell, like I mentioned also, the perception that just because you left the country you're gonna find success is more often false than true.
Right.
There are more cases of people, and the thing is that this is propagated by, there's a lot of people that when they migrate and they come back on vacation, they want to be on their best disposition. So they travel with their most expensive clothes, they rent a car that's expensive so that it looks like they're doing well, and it propagates the myth that you have to leave in order to find success. And that was finding a story where I had a character that realized that he could stay on the island. That to me was very appealing as a storyteller, because it was a different narrative from what I've seen. Because there's, if you go to even some of our most popular pop songs from the Dominican Republic talk about the dream of leaving. That's how ingrained in our DNA it is.
Okay. Right. So
We even have a name for that.
oh, you haven't. Yeah, continue. Name for that.
Yeah, we had a, I don't know how to say it in English because it's a very specific term, but the chiefs of the different tribes in the island were called caciques.
Okay.
And there was, when Columbus came to the island, before it was a country, he met one of the caciques, one of the chiefs. And he was very pro-colonizing. That's what they say. And he was duped by the Spaniards.
Yeah.
Exchange mirrors for gold.
Yeah, I have read about that.
So and his name was Guacanagaric. I can text you the name.
Yeah.
Guacanagaric. So we have a thing called the Guacanagaric complex. Whenever someone says that something from abroad is better, when they're like, oh yeah, that guy, he's doing really well in that thing. Yeah, he's not Dominican. Or yeah, that's the best food ever. Yeah, it's because it's from Italy, or even if it is. But what I'm saying is that there's sometimes colloquially very little value in what we already have with us.
Touch upon this, that so you told me about the story that it's a professor, but in the film I think that you have directly focused on him arriving on the island, and that backstory is not the focus, right? It's the survival. So in a way it's also like a survival film, but very a different kind of survival film. It's not, I guess it's not that aggressive or violent, aggressively, because when a film is a survival film, it's a lot of hardships that the people who are
Yeah.
trying to survive face. But here, the hardships were very simple, yet very important. They were not like some animal is trying to attack, not that kind of hardship.
Yeah.
It were very basic hardships, like trying to find something to drink, water.
Yeah.
It was that, and that I think kind of you feel like, okay, yeah, it's relatable. In a way, it's relatable.
Yeah, and it's on purpose.
Yeah,
It's fully on
and
purpose.
yes.
That's exactly the point I was trying to make. Actually, one of the biggest differences between the short story and the film one of the earlier decisions was to make the island habitable. In the story, it's just
Okay.
in the short story, it's an isle without a single palm tree.
Oh.
It's inhabitable.
Oh. Oh.
In the
okay.
film, which also brings back to the point, like, we have good weather, we have resources, we can make the best of what we have with what we have. And having the backstory of the character not be so present, even though I try to suggest that he has some sort of university education. For example, when it comes to building things, he builds a pretty good raft.
Right. Even that radio signal thing he's trying to do.
Or the radio, he knows electronics, or he knows a bit about first aids. He knows how to. He tries to save the life of the other castaway that appears at night, he tends to Paloma's character's fever. So that guy, he must have some sort of formal education. But I never wanted it to be obvious to what it was. He could be a doctor, he could be an engineer, he could be a mix of both. But even if you read the credits, and what they speak very little in the film. That was also on purpose.
I want to know about that. I'm very curious.
All right.
Yeah.
But I left out. I didn't assign them names.
Yeah.
That was also on purpose. That's what I wanted to say.
Right. He also
There's
hears voices. It's like some voices he hears in between some. Like maybe that indicates the backstory. I think there's woman's voice. I don't remember.
Yeah, that to me, that's a little bit also of the backstory, because those voices that he hears. I'm sorry. Those voices that he hears are directly related to the past trauma that he carries to the trip. He it's a bit, I think it's left a little bit open-ended, but there's a recurring dream sequence where he's with this woman that could be or not be Paloma's character, and he's like everything's gonna be all right. I left it open to interpretation, but originally that was this is what I worked with the actors. He convinced his wife to embark on one of these trips, and he's the only survivor, so he carries that guilt.
Right.
Of being the only survivor. That's why also he takes off the wedding ring. That's why, but I also left it open whether the female castaway was or wasn't the same character, because I wanted also to be like he's projecting onto her. That's also why their relationship starts souring pretty quickly, because he's projecting his darker impulses.
Also she wants to leave. She wants to move on, and he wants to stay.
And it's the same. And it's the same conflict he had with his wife, but backwards.
Right.
The wife wanted to stay. He wanted to leave. Now it's backwards.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. Also, I interpreted their relation as okay. It's this human have this primal need to connect with another human. So
Yeah.
that's how I interpret it. So in a way, that is also linked to survival. You cannot survive without having someone in your
Yeah.
life to connect with. So yeah, you were saying that you
I
wanted
agree.
to like your decision to not have dialogues.
Okay. So very early on, remember that even if this film came out just a couple of months ago, we shot this film during the pandemic. That was one of the main decisions to make it silent, and I'll explain why. Because I also wanted it to be about solitude. I also wanted the big conflict. This is all. It was even in the pitch for the film when I was fundraising for it. It evolves from a story of man versus nature to man versus man to man versus himself. So the silence is a big part of it. When you're left alone with your thoughts, you have to deal with yourself. You have to deal with
Yeah.
everything you're putting behind. That also brings the trauma that I was mentioning, and also from let's say, I don't want to call it anti-Hollywood stance, but the typical Castaway movie, the castaways usually talk a lot. They
Okay.
about a lot of backstory, a lot of exposition.
Right.
They even gave Tom Hanks volleyball as a character. He could talk and have monologues, and I wanted to do the opposite of that because if I'm alone on an island, this is what I'm assuming. I thankfully I've never been, but I'm probably gonna be, at least for most of the time, alone with my thoughts. I'm not gonna be talking to a tree and that also now that you mentioned the need to connect, that also makes the need to connect even more necessary, and makes the situation with them having to read each other, having to realize, but like when they finally have a full-on conversation, you realize, oh, this guy wants to stay, and she wants to leave. So even communication is a point of conflict, a big point of conflict. But just like in everyday relationships in life, what we don't communicate and when we communicate sets the tone. And from a production standpoint, I also felt that the film would be able to travel more if I did not have to translate.
I was because it doesn't have like hardly any dialogue. I felt it was easy for me to, pay attention to the visuals, because usually when it's not an English film, you have to keep like looking at the subtitle and balance.
Yeah.
So I could absorb. So basically, what I liked is that you made use of the visual medium. You made use of the camera, and like you allowed the audience to not enjoy, or like, how should I say, like kind of like enjoy it's like you're showing the potential of camera. It's like you actually up to the potential of camera, that okay, that this visual medium, it's in itself is so powerful and so complete that maybe we don't need to talk, because you can see it's a show medium, show and tell. So that was the part which fascinated me, because I told you, right, I also initially when I started, I've made a couple of films, and they've all been without dialogue, and I never really like intentionally thought about it, but I'm like, okay, I'm working with cinema, and that's how it came to me, that I should make use of the medium. So
Definitely. it as a filmmaker, it makes you. It's like the five senses. You lose one, you by necessity you augment the other four.
Yes.
So it was also a good exercise in mise en scene, trying to find creative blocking solutions for each scene. Also, like I mentioned, I wanted to make the island as appealing as possible, considering the situation. And also that also speaks into the color correction, because I remember upon first meeting with the color corrector, the DP and I, we were like, no, we want to make it colorful. We want to make it very pastel-like, because we want it to look tropical. We want it to look beautiful. And in his mind, he was like, oh, but traditionally it would make a film like a survival film, a film like this will make it grittier, more grim, less saturated. And we wanted the opposite, because we wanted to go as an audience realizing what the character was realizing. And it is that, hey, and that's also why the challenge is there's no creatures, there's no impending dangers. It's a very psychological film. We want, that's something that I hope I can achieve with audiences with this film, that people realize 20 minutes into the film that, hey, but this island is not, it's not that bad, because that's the commentary that our islands, Dominican Republic, Haiti, Cuba, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, our islands are beautiful.
Yeah.
They're amazing places. And the thing, like in everything, is the people and the way it's mismanaged.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, our home is home.
Yeah. And also you said that 20 minutes into the film and people are like, okay, there are no dialogue. So I was also like waiting, okay, now they will talk. And then it took me a while, 25 minutes later, I submitted that, oh, there are no dialogues. Forget about it. Let's watch it. Let's let the story unfold and not expect the conventional things. So that and okay, so like, okay, maybe one or two questions more. One is, do you think it's easy or difficult for actors to act in a film that has no dialogue? Is it hard, or is it easy for actors to have dialogue?
I'm gonna tell you both perspectives.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, I'm gonna refer to it. I think either way, it's not easy in and of itself. But I think that for actors, it's harder to work without dialogue. But I found that for directing, to me, I don't want to say that it was easier, but it was more, the directing was more raw. Since this is very internalized, the instincts are very raw and very primal. The direction was like more like internal monologues. You're thirsty. You're trying to find a source of water. You're trying not to get your fingers caught by grabbing that rock. So, but on the other end of the spectrum, which speaks to the actor's commitment, they have to sell that. They have to sell that they're castaways. They have to sell that they're going through a very tough time. So I think, and that's why I say to this day that one of the biggest honors in my career has been to work with Alexis, because he looking at him work taught me a lot about the job of an actor.
He's from Cuba, right?
Yes, he was. He passed away.
Yeah. She told me about that. But yeah, he's. I think he's fantastic in that movie. he's I think he did a really good job, because most of the movie, I think first half is it's him, we are only watching him.
Yeah.
And it's not easy that if you have to watch only one character, it's a lot of responsibility on the actor if 50% of the movie is just him alone on the screen. There's no one else, just him alone. And it's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. And also, now that you mentioned him alone, also one of the things that really add or facilitate the work of an actor is having someone on the receiving end, another actor or other actors that you can feedback off each other on a scene, and that energy transmits to the other. Like having that direct relationship in a scene with another actor is fuel to good acting.
Right.
So imagine not having anyone else to interact with.
Yeah,
It's all in you.
Yes.
It's you.
That says
All
a
the time.
lot about his caliber as an actor. Yeah.
Well, he was an amazing actor. He was because I was a big fan of the film that made him an international. The film that was of his that was an international sensation, which was Juan of the Dead.
One.
It's a zombie movie.
Okay.
Juan of the Dead.
Okay.
He's it's a story set in Havana
Okay.
about a zombie infection,
Oh.
but told in a very Cuban way and talking about very Cuban problems and tackling the subject of migrating because you want to flee a state that is not working at all socially and politically. And that film, with that premise, did really well in festivals in 2012. It premiered in Toronto.
Oh.
It won a Spanish Academy Award in 2013. And Alexis was the lead actor. Since then, I was a big fan. That's the first time I saw him, and I was like, I really hope I can meet him one day. I didn't know that almost 10 years later we would be making a film together. And that to me is still, if not the best, one of the best experiences I've had.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, okay, so like one or two final questions. One is have you watched any Indian films, or what is your perception of Indian cinema? Because for me, perception of Caribbean, Latin American movies is, people is shaped by what I see in Hollywood, or TV shows,
Yeah.
So what is your experience about the Indian cinema? And the last question that I want to ask is, what is your hope from cinema as an art form?
Okay. So, honestly, when I think of Indian cinema, my mind, even though I've been exposed to, after seeing it in festivals, I've been exposed to other forms.
The song and dance.
I always tend to think about the dance number.
Yeah.
I used to love. I don't know. Maybe you know where this is from, but I remember when I was in high school, and YouTube had just come out, that a video became viral from India. But it's
Okay.
from an old movie from the 80s, because it was called Indian Thriller.
Okay.
It was a dance number with the thriller choreography and Indian characters. And I don't know
Okay.
what film that's from. I've always wondered where it was from. But a film that I really enjoyed from India was Three Idiots.
Ah, it's
I don't
it's a great blockbuster. Very successful
I
film.
remember that one even came here.
Oh.
That's why I'm mentioning it. You don't usually see Indian or Asian films, for that matter, in a Caribbean country's mainstream cinema.
Yeah, even
Maybe you
I
see
had
it
no
at,
idea.
yeah, Three Idiots. I remember. I don't remember. Also, yeah. Three Idiots. I remember everyone talking about it when it came out.
It was
That to me was.
huge success. It broke a lot
They
of
even made-
records.
They even made if I remember correctly, they even made a Mexican remake.
Oh, really?
Go figure. See, like there's I think there's commonalities between our culture that people
Yeah.
are not aware.
Yes, yes. Maybe
think-
that's why it resonated.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like I need to explore it more. Indian cinema. I as a moviegoer, I have been more exposed to Japanese, Korean, Hong Kong cinema. I am a huge fan of Wong Kar-wai, and I love what Bong Joon-ho is doing in Korea. I love this film. I don't remember. I don't remember the name of the director. It's called Three Iron. This is a film that I think you would like because just like our films, it has very little to no dialogue.
Okay.
And it actually Alexis recommended the film to me when we were filming, and I watched it on one of the days off of shooting, and it's amazing. It's a film about this squatter, and he stalks people that have like really nice houses, and he waits until they go out on a trip, and he stays at their houses, and maybe if he finds something broken, he repairs it and he leaves.
That's very
That's the
interesting.
premise.
That's interesting premise.
But the story comes from one of these houses that he decides to stay at while the owners are away.
It sounds
It's more romantic.
okay.
It's its own thing. So this squatter, he realizes that he's not alone.
Okay.
The husband and wife, they left on separate trips.
Okay.
The marriage is falling apart. So the wife, she lied that she was going on a trip. So she goes back to the house and meets the stranger. And it's about the developing relationship of these two strangers that don't communicate verbally.
Okay.
It's a beautiful film. I think that the director is Kim Ki-duk. I think that's his name.
You
Oh, but I also forgot to tell you, my favorite Indian director is Mira Nair.
Oh, Mira Nair. Yeah. She's internationally
Yeah.
acclaimed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love a film she did, Salam Bombay.
Oh,
I think it
yeah.
was.
Yes.
I love that film.
Yeah, that's also a very successful film, Salam Bombay. Right. Okay, so yeah, you can answer the final question.
All right. So let's say my hopes with cinema, or my vision with cinema, is that it makes us understand each other better as people. Because it has the power, like we've mentioned all throughout this conversation, to show us different perspectives, different realities, different ways of living. I've never been to India. I really wanted to go to the festival, but I was shooting a film, and I believe that like filmmaking or films that are made with an honest intent, with artistic integrity and a different perspective, have the power to close that gap in our cultures, and also make us all understand each other better. I think I think that's the big superpower. Because if you look at it from let's say business or imperialistic perspective, that's the success that Hollywood has had. If you realize it, we all know American culture by now.
Yeah.
We all know what McDonald's is. We all know what who Spider-Man is. And I think our industries, even if they have less resources, we have such powerful stories and stories that can connect with people from all over the world. That is my hope, that we can achieve a level of consciousness and appreciation for all of our different cultures, and that cinema is a tool to achieve that. And that, I think that it's a way for us to understand each other better. It's a way to understand our past. It's a way to think of our future, and it's a way. It's really a way of even of problem solving. We, through fiction, through film, through the medium of storytelling, it's an infinite resource for humanity.
Yes.
Ever since we learned to communicate, we've learned to tell stories, and stories are what have made us survive up to this day, January 19th.
So yes, I won't keep you for long since I have other engagements, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Because before starting, I was wondering, okay, what are the things that I need to ask and what are the things I need to cover, but you know what, these things, I like that it went in so many directions, and it was freewheeling. I liked it, that I did not I did not create a hardcore questionnaire, because I wanted it to go places. So I'm happy that we did that. It's one of the
Thank you.
This is how cinema also brings people together.
Yeah.
This is the power
Definitely.
of cinema.
And it's also, I want to finish our conversation with a quote that I read, actually, curiously, 2 or 3 days ago. It was Willem Dafoe. He was saying that one of the things that he misses most about the theater experience was the communal aspect. The way that we go to cinemas, and then afterwards we go to dinner and we talk about what we saw. That is powerful.
Yes.
That is, when you watch a good film, a film that transcends and that changes you, and you get to talk about it with others who saw it. It's, to me, that's one of the biggest beauties of cinema.
Yes, true. So
Had a good time.
yeah, hope
Thank you so much.
Yes, sorry for keep you waiting this long.
No, I really enjoyed our conversation, and can't wait to see whatever films you recommend. I'll send you my recommendations. I want to see what you write.
Yes.
And let's stay in touch.
Yes, we will keep in touch. I will keep sharing. We'll keep talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so
let's do
much.
that.
Thank you so much, Hector. Thank you.
All right. Have a great weekend.
Yes, you too. Have a great weekend.